Steve?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Stephen Schwartz, a co-founder of the Group for Good Government, the GGG, and we're here tonight with two of the candidates for the supervisor position in our town. A brief word about the GGG. Some of you who watched the town council debate will have heard this. We are a strictly nonpartisan organization composed of members that span the political spectrum, but we are united in the concept that we treat each other with respect, we learn from each other, and we believe in civility and public discourse. And I think we've contributed over the 12 years we've been in existence to a heightened level of civility in the conduct of public affairs in our town. And part of that is hosting forums, debates at the Board of Education level as well, the encouragement of people learning about the issues and treating each other with respect. With that in mind, I'll turn it over to Arthur Malman, our chairman, who will host this debate.
Okay. For those of you who have seen our debates before, our format is relatively straightforward. And tonight it's within 1 minute segments. Each of Peter and Jeff will have 1 minute to introduce themselves. And then we'll go on to a series of questions which have been put together by us based on the input we've gotten and the questions we've gotten from you, the public, in response to our emails and in response to our ad in the Star. We'll have those questions asked first of one candidate, then the other. Each will have a minute to answer, and then once that first round of answers is completed, either of the candidates who wants to ask or speak again for up to 1 minute may do so. We'd like to keep things moving to get as many questions that you have answered as possible, but we realize we can't obviously answer all of the questions. What we'd like to do at the end is have each candidate take 1 minute to summarize their thoughts on the future of East Hampton. And to start things off, I guess alphabetically, it's always bad to have a high letter, Jeff, so you have to go first.
Okay. Hello to everybody. I'm in this race for a very simple reason. East Hampton is my home, and I want to protect it. For me, it's never been a brand name. It's not a reality television show, and I never call it the Hamptons. It's a real community with real people, and anything I can do to make it quieter, calmer, and slower, I will do. And I'm worried as I see the houses and the parties getting bigger and bigger while our local community gets smaller and smaller. And when I talk to people on the street, which I've been doing a lot, there is a great sense of unease and a great sense of loss that we're losing the community. And I want to talk about a significant difference between my opponent and I, and it has to do with how we deal with people. Back when we were dealing with the Duryea case, my opponent made a deal with a very powerful and wealthy hedge fund billionaire that essentially would let him skate through most of our zoning code. And we stopped that. We stopped that deal. But more recently, when the supervisor's idea was to put a 185-foot cell tower in a neighborhood woodland, he talked to the people that came into the room quite differently when he faced the public. He was sort of a my way or the highway guy, telling him that the deal had to go through and it was the only location. That was untrue. In fact,
Jeff, we got to give Peter a shot here too. We're going to keep on to these 1 minute segments. So Peter, you want to just take off?
Yeah, I'm disappointed my candidates right out of the gate trying to cast aspersions on my character rather than addressing the issues, but I'll continue. I'd like to thank, first of all, the Group for Good Government for providing the community with an opportunity to hear directly from the candidates. I've served East Hampton government for more than 2 decades, 11 years on our planning and zoning boards, 10 years on the town board, and I'm now seeking my 3rd term as supervisor. Throughout my many years of service, I've always placed preserving our local environment, our water quality, and building our community's strength and resilience at the forefront of my efforts. I've worked to preserve hundreds of acres of open space, protect public beach access, and preserve historic structures. But what I'm most finding rewarding and challenging also has been safely guiding our community through the worst global pandemic in a century. We kept our COVID-19 infection rate to the third lowest on Long Island metro area, enlisting over 100 community volunteers to administer over 9,000 vaccination doses. I'm endorsed by the Democratic Party, the Working Families Party, the New York League of Conservation Voters, the Sierra Club, and I ask you for your vote on November 2nd. Thank you.
Yeah, our
I'd
first
like
question.
to answer that if I can.
No, not on this.
Oh, I see. That's only for questions.
That's only for questions.
Okay.
But that's a good thought. I hadn't thought of that one. The first question is really kind of an easy question, and I think it's really, what's in your heart here, and that's your vision for East Hampton. Peter will go first, and it's this. Even though the supervisor is elected for only a 2-year term, what is your vision for East Hampton over the next 6 to 8 years?
So I think that's a pretty easy vision, really. I've been fortunate enough to live here most of my adult life. My family has ties here that go back to the 1700s. And I think my opponent did touch on that in his earlier statements, in that, we have seen dramatic change here. We absolutely must be very careful about how things proceed. We need to protect our water quality, our environment, and we need to protect the local character here. And we need to make sure that we offer opportunities for local people to continue to stay in this community, because without them, we lose really the fabric of what our community is. It's really a blessing to live in a small town community where people come together in times of crisis like COVID. I want to make sure that that's around for future generations to enjoy. And I'm committed to doing everything I can to make sure that that's what happens.
Jeff?
Yeah, well, my vision for East Hampton is that we need to stand strong and stand up as a small community. I think we have to recognize that we're a small town, and we have to control what we can control to keep things calm and quiet. The airport is one of the things that comes to mind. That it focuses on a problem that we have here, and that is that there are a lot of folks that come in and out and are worried about how quickly they can do it. I'm more worried about the people that want to stay. And there is really, a great concern about houses ever getting bigger, parties getting louder. There are things we can do to control both of those problems. When I brought one of them up recently, that we could change our special events law to calm down these rock concerts masquerading as parties, and a fellow brought in a 30-piece marching band. My opponent said, I love marching bands. That's not good enough. We have to do more to stand up and be like, there was an old movie called The Mouse That Roared. We have to be tough, say no to people, and change the way we do business and make it quieter and calmer.
Peter, you and Jeff will each get an extra minute on this topic, so you're next.
Okay. So, I think in terms, first of all, I'll say, yes, I do love marching bands. My wife was the band director at East Hampton High School for over 25 years, teaching thousands of local kids the joy of music. My opponent would like to decide ahead of time who's allowed to play at your party and who's not. He wanted to know ahead of time. And, I just don't think that kind of government intervention is correct. Now, we do have certainly noise laws, which we do enforce. What he's alluding to are special events that in fact complied with our noise regulations. I have worked hard to limit the number of special events over the years. We've said no to many outside organizations that want to come here just to use our town as a venue. But he's also come out against, the fundraiser for the library held on town property. Didn't think that was appropriate because it had been purchased with CPF funds. Look, I think what we really critically need to do at this time, and it's really getting to be a crisis, is we need to figure out how to work around the income inequalities that really have negatively impacted the ability for local people to stay in our town.
Yeah, Jeff?
Well, it just seemed, that when when I suggested in a very serious way that when somebody holds a rock concert for 500 people in Amagansett and a constituent comes in and tells us she could hear the music all the way on Marine Boulevard, that something's wrong with our code. And I think there's a way to control it. And I also did, criticize the fact that the Special Events Committee went along with a 30-piece marching band. We have the authority to tell people that certain types of activity are just incompatible with residential use. And I don't think it matters if you live on a 20-acre estate or a half-acre piece of land. Certain uses just are not being good neighbors, and a 30-piece marching band is like that. And I'm not looking to censor music. I like rock concerts as much as anybody, but not in my neighborhood and not where they're going to blast out people who live miles away. I also think the airport presents a real challenge. It's a real opportunity to focus on who we're governing for. And I have a constructive plan that I put out, and my opponent seems to avoid wanting to make any comment on the airport.
Okay, we'll get to the airport in a few minutes because it is one of the biggest issues about which we got questions. But let's stop for a second and just fill in some information on COVID. The latest information on COVID in the town's website is back from May, that I could find at least, when things were looking better. But Peter's office announced recently that it's now a positivity rate of, I think, 10 or 12%, which is 8 times the positivity rate in New York City. New York City requires people 12 and older to show proof that they have received at least one vaccine dose in order to enjoy indoor activities, including dining, fitness, entertainment. And I don't think East Hampton has that type of requirement yet. And at what point would you change this? And that's Jeff. You're the first up on this one.
Are you asking when we would change the requirement for vaccination for younger folks? I'm not sure.
No, I'm sorry. That was maybe a little bit difficult to follow. And by the way, any of these questions, if you don't understand them, please feel free. It doesn't count against your time to ask me to repeat it, because if you don't understand it, 25 other people don't either, including me, probably half the time. It's the thrust of the question was, we're having much higher positivity rates than New York City. And yet New York City, at this point at least, has much more stringent COVID requirements. You can't go into a restaurant unless you're vaccinated. You can't go into a gym. You can certainly eat outside. And should we be looking at some of those things? And if not, when? And not only in response to COVID, but the next thing that comes up. What should be our criteria for making hard decisions in the town?
Well, I think a big unspoken problem on positivity rates is that our testing has been deficient, and we haven't adequately answered what was going on. I mean, frankly, the company that we hired is a bit fly by night. They're being investigated now in California for making the same kind of poor medical decisions and imposing delays that I've had constituents complain about, including the last Democratic congressional candidate who called up and said, I can't get results on my PCR test. And I know somebody today who was told, oh, you'll get the result in 7 to 10 days. Completely useless. That company has not been performing. When it was introduced by a member of the town board, he mentioned that it was venture capitalists are getting into this because it's a profit center. I was concerned about it. Their lab is in Las Vegas. They're doing a lousy job. And you know what? We didn't do much about it until last week when we quietly hired another firm. Incidentally, they're charging twice as much as a local physician right nearby, George Dempsey. They're charging $100 versus $50. George has volunteered to help us. The town board's never been able to take him up on it.
Peter?
Yeah, so the higher positivity rates, I want to explain that a little bit. Suffolk County, when they post the rates of infection, are basing that on the zip code of the testee's primary residence. So you can imagine East Hampton, with probably the vast majority of people here now, do not have a local primary resident zip code. They have second or third homes, and they've been spending time during the pandemic. So I think it's probably that the rates are higher all over within the county testing than they're actually shown. And what we actually were able to do, because we had local testing for people here in the community, we had a much better idea of what the real numbers were. I'm gonna disagree with Mr. Bragman's characterization of the vendee who is using the town property. We've also expanded because we know there's been a huge upsurge in demand for testing here locally, and we've provided it. We're almost the only town on Long Island that's doing that. Oyster Bay is another one.
No, can I make a comment?
No.
If they're reporting positivity rates based on your primary residence, that would not boost our rates out here. It would do the opposite, because if New Yorkers come here and test, that high infection rate is going to be shown in their primary residence. That explanation doesn't explain anything. And he's wrong about our testing company, and we just haven't talked about it because we're not being open about what's going on. They're being currently investigated in California for exactly the same kind of things they're doing here. They're making people get 3 tests, 2 of which are useless. One is an antibody test. They're insisting that everybody get 3 tests because it boosts up what they can charge to insurance companies. They are not a competent company. We should have been on alert because they were a brand new company. They're like a penny stock company. It's almost like they're boosting their stock based on coming into East Hampton. It's good we have a new company now, but we waited too long. We'd know more if we had accurate testing.
Peter?
I want to rebut that, because just because Mr. Bragman doesn't understand the concept doesn't mean it's not true and accurate. What my point was that because we have real numbers of the people who actually got tested here, rather than based on their zip code, we know what the percentage rate of those people tested here is. And the other method of using primary residence zip code does not reveal that, because it's reported in New York City, because it's reported Western Suffolk, wherever those people's home address is. But we're getting a real snapshot because these are people in our community, working in our community, visiting our community, who've gotten tests, and the company directly reports to us on that. And again, Mr. Bragman's always quick to criticize somebody, but has he ever initiated any effort to find another company? No. We've met with Dr. Dempsey. Dr. Dempsey did open up his practice for a while to members of the public, but we also had Northwell Health come and working with the healthcare center next door. We had testing earlier on than anybody had. So, again, it's easy to criticize, a little harder to actually produce any kind of work.
No,
Okay.
that's not fair. I was involved in all the early decision making, and that's what I criticized MedEvolve.
Okay, wait. We've gone through that question. The next one starts with Peter. It's for affordable housing and how you get people to go along with affordable housing. For those of us who remember a cantankerous old Mayor Koch, several years ago in New York City, there was a requirement to set up methadone clinics. And so he invited to his office the leaders of all the local planning boards, who expected to spend 7 or 8 hours arguing about the fact that each clinic should be outside their district. Instead, Koch distributed to each of the leaders at the meeting a list of one methadone clinic in everybody's district. And he thanked them for coming and said the next meeting was going to be 2 weeks from now. And when they came back, they could either take the place that he chose or come up with another one. But they had to have one methadone clinic in each of their districts. Given our problems with people not wanting affordable housing in their backyard, is there some way that the town board could operate this way?
I wouldn't take that approach. I think it's much more effective to meet directly with the neighborhoods and take those public comments. We recently purchased 395 Panago Place and have proposed a development of affordable housing on 7 acres out of that 12 acres. we had comments from the neighbors. And frankly, I was extremely pleased to hear that they expressed directly to us without a great deal of hyperbole or emotion what their concerns were. And, I think that engaging with them and listening to those concerns and developing a plan and that's acceptable and compatible with that neighborhood's crucially important. And so that's the direction we're headed with that project. And, again, what I find is many people understand and support the idea of the fact that we need more housing affordability, that we need better cell phone service, you name it, we need renewable energy. But when there's some part of that project that would occur in their neighborhood, they're in opposition to that. And I think it's really important that we look at what the overall impact of that is, that we really need to support our community broadly and get behind projects. Thank you.
Jeff?
Well, I've been the liaison to the Housing Authority since I took office, and I think they do a very good job, actually. And it's true that on the Pantago project, the neighbors, I think, provided constructive comment, and it's going to help us make that project, I think, a better project. And it's a good lesson to keep in mind. It's something I really believe in. Public comment helps us. It helps shape projects. It tells us where we're going off base. And it's a reason to pay attention and welcome public comment, which I don't think the board always does. On another project on 3 Mile Harbor, there's been more pushback from neighbors. But again, and that's a joint venture project with the Housing Authority. But again, I think the planning process, by opening up and hearing neighbors, makes these projects a better job. It helps us shape them. We look at the density in a different way. And I've learned to trust local knowledge about neighborhoods and conditions. And so and the other thing is, we are somewhat limited as to where we can put projects like this, because we have to find land that's available for sale. And that's a real driver, unlike New York, where you have a lot of different places. So I think it's a different situation here.
Peter?
So you want me to answer the same question on affordable housing?
No, you did. This is the second round where you can make further statements, or you can both stay with those statements and we'll go on to the next question.
Look,
I've got no problem with that.
We've worked very hard under my administration and during the time that I've been on the town board to increase the number of housing units. We've had over 50 in the last couple of years come online. We have another 110 planned, and East Hampton, actually leads per capita the number of housing units of any community on Long Island in housing affordability category. I think we have over 600. But the fact remains that with our, constant rise, meteoric rise of real estate values, that we got to the point where no one who works in the local economy could afford a house here. And, with the pandemic, it only got worse. We've seen, people come in and buy up the remaining real estate, remaining rental housing. I think it's critically important that the governor just signed the community housing fund law. I met with her back in August 21st and explained to her why that was so critical to us. I'm really super glad that she supported Fred Thiel's legislation. And we got that passed.
Jeff?
Yeah, I can say that working with the Housing Authority has been, an eye-opener for me. I'm actually the first town board member that actually attended their meetings. And they told me that. And I took some time and sat down with the principal in the firm that they're joint venturing with on the 3 Mile Harbor project. And it was quite interesting to learn the ins and outs of the financing, which is rather complicated. And the Gansett Meadow project, which brought in, I think, 35 units, happened while I was the liaison. And by paying attention at those meetings, I was also in the early stages of our budget able to ask the town board for an extra $25,000. Won't break the bank, But, the housing authority said they were really, in need and kind of scraping a little bit on money and could use it for the preliminary engineering on that 3 Mile Harbor project. And I was really happy to be able to do that. So I think we could work better with the housing authority. I think we could also increase the money that we give them in our budget. I think they haven't had a budget increase in like 10 or 15 years. They could use it. They carry the ball a lot.
Okay, now our next question is the most popular question among viewers, and it's called airport, in case you didn't know. And this is Jeff to go first. Some people are suggesting closing the East Hampton Airport for a year without any definite plan of what's going to happen when it reopens, but rather to see what happens to Montauk and other aspects of the community. A question was raised, for example, what about the people who work at East Hampton Airport? Will the town pay them to sit home for a year without salary and having no idea if and when the airport might reopen? And if they don't sit around and make themselves available and it reopens, who's going to run it? The idea of just closing it is kind of nice on its face, but what about some of the problems if the worst comes to pass for poor Montauk? Jeff?
Everybody knows, at least in the government, and people have worked in the airport, that we need to close the airport for a very brief time in order to recapture local control.
Correct.
I'm the only member of the town board that put out a position in this, and I wrote a letter publicly to the Star. It had nothing to do with closing the airport for a year. That was not what I recommended. What I said we could do was, when we reopened, we could declare an aircraft holiday, an aircraft holiday for 1 year, so that we could eliminate commercial traffic, helicopters, jets, seaplanes, turboprops, and we would leave private pilots to operate freely as they have in the airport during that time. This would permit us to monitor developments in real time. I think it would help people to understand whether there were any real impacts to the economy, which I'm skeptical of, frankly. It would also let us measure what, if any, impacts Montauk experienced and deal with it, because we could adjust as we went along. And at the end of the day, everything would be on the table. Closure would be on the table. Even ending private plane flights would be on the table, as would every other alternative. That's not a suggestion to close the airport.
Okay. Peter?
Yeah, I'm kind of amazed by Mr. Bragman's walking back what he published in the Star. I mean, he said take a 1-year holiday from aircraft use at the airport, basically, in Montauk. And you know what? That's no holiday for Montauk. The East Hampton Airport does need to be closed down in order to reopen as a private airport, but I don't favor closing that airport before we know what we're doing. I think that's reckless, it's dangerous, and it's ill-advised. We all know that the airport can't continue as it is. And as far as me making statements about that, I've made numerous statements, public meetings. I've put out a press release today again about the airport and what I think we should do. And what I think we should do is that we should immediately impose curfews. There are already flight restrictions, sunset to sunrise in Montauk, so that won't displace traffic to Montauk. We can take steps immediately that will have an impact while we decide how to deal with the diversion issue and other more substantive issues.
Jeff?
Yeah, I do want to have a follow-up. There you go again, Peter. You're just misstating what I read. And believe me, I understand what I read. English is my native tongue. I know what I wrote. And I know what you've been saying. You've been saying, I'm not going to do anything that would increase traffic to Montauk. That's one of your statements. And then your other statement in the East Hampton Star was, we have a lot of work to do to decide what, understanding the possibilities. He's got his foot planted firmly on both sides of the issues. We know if we do anything to give relief to people who are experiencing noise, environmental impacts, safety impacts from commercial traffic, there's a possibility of some diversion to Montauk. It's impossible to swear to Montauk nothing's going to happen to Montauk, but we can keep an eye out on what happens to Montauk and control it. I proposed a deliberative, rational process where we could watch in real time and keep track of what's going on. It's the way to go. Maybe Peter's a little reluctant to take a position on this because his committee took a $5,000 contribution from the principal in the FBO. And I think that's a little problematic. I think it's a little unseemly.
Okay.
I'm the only one that has a real plan for what to do.
Yeah, I'd like to say a little more about that. First of all, campaign contributions by people within the community are broad. They come from all aspects. And I think the person at the FBO realizes that a rational approach to this is what's needed. And he thinks that I'm the most rational person in dealing with how we move forward in the airport. And what I've done is to say that no, displacing the problem in East Hampton Airport to Montauk is not acceptable, and that we need to carefully study every step that we take. But I'm not willing to close the airport for a holiday for a year and then see what happens. I do think that we need to monitor what we do as we go along to make sure that whatever unintended consequences don't actually make the problem worse. And that this is an extremely complex issue. There are a lot of variables. People want to get here by air. They're going to find a way to get here by air. And so I think, taking a careful approach is really the most prudent and rational way to go.
Okay.
Can I get one more comment in? Can I get one more comment in?
Sure.
I've outlined a prudent and rational course. It is not closing the airport, no matter how many times you repeat it, Peter. That's not what I wrote. And the point is that if we do anything to control the traffic that's causing all the pain in the town of East Hampton and other places, it's going to lessen the quantity of traffic, mostly of helicopters. That has a risk no matter how we do it, whether it's curfews, whether it's a slot system, or whether we eliminate them and watch them. We have to be careful about diversion. It's not off the table for any measure we take. The point I'm making is you can't promise Montauk nothing will happen and at the same time say, I'm doing my job and we're going to reduce traffic. You can't have both.
Okay, Jeff, 1 second. We just went over on this one, which I think it is a topic, but Peter gets the last 30 seconds on this one.
Yeah, I just think that clearly if you limit helicopters, as things are right now in East Hampton, there will be diversion of helicopters to Montauk. And I think that they will fly over the spine of the town and that they will impact the whole rest of the town on their way to Montauk. I have reached out directly to the Montauk airport owners, and I've had some very positive movement. And I think that I'm optimistic that we will resolve that diversion issue.
But meanwhile, you're not going to do anything about helicopters.
Dude,
that's what you're saying.
Okay, wait. I think we
interrupted. That's just rude. I'm sorry.
Okay. Wait, guys. Remember Steve's statements about civilians?
I do. That's why I'm disappointed.
Let's go to a really simple topic. Okay.
Can't we stay on this for a while?
I know everybody wants. Honestly, I don't know if I mentioned it in this session, but I would say a third to a half of all the questions we got were the airport. Everybody realizes it's terribly, terribly complex. But the next one's easy, and that's Truck Beach. And that is one of the folks said, hey, look, we lost in court, and so the homeowners own the beach. And now we're talking about condemning the beach, which will cost us millions of dollars. Is there a chance, or should we think about sitting down with the owners or a committee of owners and suggesting a system where you'd have to have an East Hampton permit, you'd be a resident, there'd be limited numbers of days of the week, and there'd be limited times. or something of that nature before spending several $1 million to condemn the beach. I've forgotten who I gave. I think it's Peter. You go first.
Yeah, I've been very strong and vocal about my position on public access rights regarding our beaches, no matter where they are. We need to hold the line on this issue. Our beaches are precious. They're ephemeral in nature. We need to make sure that development doesn't get in the way of our beaches. And, there are a number of problems with this particular court ruling, one of which is that they did not address a number of substantive issues, and that the more recent TRO goes beyond what the court ruling upheld, which was the Benson reservations, which allows fishermen to access and fish on that stretch of beach, regardless of ownership. There's long been a history of this, goes back as long as, there were seine fishermen on this beach. They've seined. It's a very productive section of beach. The current fish crews still use that spot. I just think we have to do everything we can. And in terms of what is it going to cost? Well, we don't know what the value of that beach is to property owners. They can't build anything on it. They can't exclude others from it because of the reservations.
Jeff?
Yeah, we did some zealous, legal work on it, worked hard on it, and the case went against us. You can try in front of a judge to re-argue his order. It's not likely that a judge is going to rethink his order absent some really compelling proof, because the standard of proof to get a temporary restraining order is pretty high. So I'm not sure that that's going to be an avenue that's productive for us. In terms of talking to the other side, I believe in talking to anybody who will talk. I'm not sure that having won this case to the degree that they have, that that you're going to have a lot of give on their side. I think it probably is going to come down to us using a condemnation on it. And you're right. It could be, we've been shocked before. I lived through another condemnation many years ago as a planning board attorney on Barcelona Point, and the New York State Court awarded the highest award they'd ever done in a condemnation. But I think it's worth fighting. I'd be willing to talk if they'll talk, but I'm a little skeptical they will.
Okay, this one was pretty easy, but let's have a really easy one to end with, because we're running out of time, and that is marijuana. Apparently, the way the New York law is set up, the town of East Hampton, like other jurisdictions, can opt out of allowing adult use of marijuana on site or in retail dispensaries, and it has to make a choice by December. And I guess, Jeff, you're next.
Yeah, well, I tend to be pro marijuana, basically. I mean, I think it's ruined many lives. I remember reading about a case not long ago where a young man was arrested in Texas on possession charges and wound up dying in custody. So there's been a lot of injustice and pain caused by the use of what's essentially an innocuous drug. So I'm happy to see it move forward into legalization. I'm not, dispensaries, I think, are different than locations at which marijuana can be used. We can control some of that through zoning, but frankly, I haven't made my mind up on that. I really want to hear from the community. I know that the reservation is fully engaged in the marijuana business, and I think intends to be a major dispensary and a major place for using marijuana. That might affect the views of local people. I've talked to some people who are concerned about the impact on kids, and just again, I'd like to keep things calm and quiet. And I'm not sure that having places where people are actually using edibles or smoking or whatever they do these days is a good idea for the town. And I also want to hear from the public on this. I can't say I've made my mind up on it.
Peter?
Yeah, we have a lot of options here. Jeff alluded to a few of them. We can, through zoning, restrict what the locations of any retail or on-site consumption business would be. Many communities have started that process, and a number have relegated those distributions to certain zoning districts like industrial zoning or the like. They've limited how close you could have it to a church or place of worship, to schools, etc. I initiated, some discussion at the board level. We've had a couple discussions about it. There's more to do, more to engage the public on this particular issue. I agree with the councilman that decriminalizing marijuana is a good step, but I'm also in favor of prohibiting smoking of marijuana in public places, on sidewalks, beaches, and the like, just as I would be for cigarettes. I think the secondhand impacts of that are not good. But we'll hear from the public. We can opt out by the 31st, and we can always opt back in, but you can never opt out once you've opted in.
Okay. Well, I thank you both. This one seems to be an open issue that is going to be, I guess, discussed a lot in the next couple of months. At this point, I want to thank you both. And Peter, could you go first to summarize and close, and then Jeff, who started, can go last.
Sure. Thank you again for this opportunity. My family has ties here in East Hampton that go back to the 1700s. I've lived the better part of my life here. My children were born here. I've raised them with my wife of 34 years, Marilyn, who taught at East Hampton High School for over 25 years. Our children attended local schools. And as far as I'm concerned, there's no place on earth I would rather live. East Hampton is my home. My vision for East Hampton is a future that is forever vigilant in protecting our natural resources, a future that honors our past, respects our history, traditions, and diversity, and is full of opportunities for all of our residents who work and live here. There's much more to do to ensure that future generations will continue to enjoy the beauty and the bounty of our surroundings and experience the care and support of small town community. I'm Supervisor Peter Van Scoik. I'm endorsed by the Democratic Party, the Working Families Party, the New York League of Conservation Voters, and the Sierra Club. And I ask for your support on November 2nd. Thank you very much.
Jeff?
Well, my vision for East Hampton is also based on my experience as a 35-year resident. And I also raised my son here and went through Little League and getting up too early for school and homework and the whole deal. But I think we're at a tipping point. And I sense it very clearly when I talk to people who feel that, the houses get bigger and bigger, the parties get louder, and the local community gets smaller and smaller. And it ties into issues about how we deal with the folks that are out here. I think it ties into the airport, as a matter of fact. I'm not as concerned about the folks who place a premium on how fast they can get in and out of town. I'm more worried about the folks that want to stay in town and have a life here for their children and their grandchildren. And I think it takes standing up for our identity as a small town. And that means not making fun of, having 30-piece marching bands, which is clearly an excessive kind of entertainment for neighbors to have, and not, dismissing rock concerts and saying everything's okay because I'm trying to censor music. We've got to quiet things down in town. We have to assert that we're a small community. We may be small, but we can do good things, but we have to know that we have the power to do it. And I'd like to engage the public much more fully and energize them to that goal.
Thank you very much, both of you. And you guys always give us a good debate. You never shy. And I think we have a lot of important issues that have to be thrashed out that are very, very complex. I'm the chairman of the airport management advisory committee, and I wish I had the answer. So I'd be happy to share it with you. But thank you very much for joining us tonight. And thank you all for listening. And I hope you've gotten a good chance to understand how some of these issues are much more complex than you think when you hear a quick soundbite. Thank you, Steve, for timing, and thank you both for joining us. And thank you
guys.
Thanks, Steve. Arthur. Thank you, Steve.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, LTV.
Okay.
A lot of fun.
That's right. Thank you, LTV, without which we'd be nothing.